A mother of two vanishes without a trace on a bitter winter night in Utah, leaving behind an empty home and a story filled with dark secrets, obsession, and ultimately, tragedy. The date was December 6, 2009, a day that would haunt the quiet community of West Valley City forever. Susan Powell seemed to have vanished into thin air. The pristine condition of her home suggested no struggle, no forced entry, no signs of the violence that so often accompanies such disappearances. Her husband Josh's explanation raised more questions than answers. He claimed he had taken their two young sons, Braden, just 2, and Charlie, 4, camping in the dead of night, despite temperatures that had plunged well below freezing. It was a decision that defied logic, yet it was just the beginning of a story that would grow increasingly disturbing with each revealed detail. Long before her disappearance, Susan's life had taken an unexpected turn when she met Josh Powell at a church function. She was just 18, pursuing her dreams in cosmetology, her future bright with promise. Both had grown up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and their shared faith seemed to mark the beginning of a blessed union. After a whirlwind 6-month courtship, they married in April 2001 at the Portland, Oregon Temple, embarking on what should have been a life of shared dreams and growing love. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect beginning lurked a darkness that would slowly consume their lives. When the newlyweds moved in with Josh's father, Stephen, what should have been a temporary arrangement became a nightmare for Susan. Stephen developed an obsessive fixation on his daughter-in-law that went far beyond the boundaries of family bonds. He secretly recorded her, spied on her in private moments, and invaded her personal space in ways that would make any woman feel unsafe in her own home. Even after Susan rejected his disturbing advances in 2003, the shadow of his obsession continued to loom over their lives. The move to West Valley City in 2004 should have been a fresh start, but Josh's inability to maintain steady employment and his reckless spending habits only added to their mounting problems. As Susan built a successful career as a broker with Wells Fargo Investments, Josh spiraled deeper into debt. The birth of their sons Charles and Braden in 2005 and 2007 brought moments of joy. But according to Susan's journals, these were increasingly overshadowed by Josh's possessive and controlling behavior. Most troubling was his persistent defense of his father's inappropriate obsession with Susan, creating a web of psychological manipulation that would eventually lead to one of the most haunting disappearances in Utah's history. What happened on that frozen December night would set in motion a chain of events that would culminate in an unthinkable tragedy, leaving a community searching for answers and justice that may never come. The shadow over the Powell household grew darker with each passing year. In 2007, Josh's financial irresponsibility reached a breaking point when he filed for bankruptcy, drowning in over $200,000 of debt. But it was Susan's actions in 2008 that revealed the true extent of her fear, actions that now seem like desperate cries for help from a woman who sensed her time might be running out. In June, with trembling hands, Susan penned what would later be seen as a prophetic warning to her loved ones. The words she wrote were chilling. Josh had threatened that if she sought divorce, he would destroy her. Their children would be left without parents. It was more than a threat. It was a dark prophecy that would haunt those who read it later. Just weeks after writing that letter, Susan took an even more dramatic step. She recorded herself on video, her voice steady, but her eyes betraying her fear. "I'm covering all my bases," she said, documenting their assets with methodical care. "I hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after." The pause in her voice spoke volumes about her doubts. Her friend Kyrie Helwell became a confidant during these troubled times, receiving frequent emails from Susan that revealed her desperate attempts to save her marriage. She had set herself a deadline, April 6, 2010, their wedding anniversary, to see if things would improve. It was a deadline she would never reach. The events of December 6, 2009, started ordinarily enough. At noon, Susan attended church with her boys, finding solace in her faith. Later, her friend Giovanna Owings visited their home, sharing lunch with the couple. Giovanna would later recall that Susan seemed normal that day, a detail that would haunt her in the years to come. At 2:29 p.m., Susan made her final phone call, unaware that her voice would never again reach out to friends or family. The afternoon unfolded with deceptive normalcy. Josh prepared pancakes, a domestic scene that masked the sinister events to come. Around 5 o'clock p.m., Susan mentioned feeling tired and decided to nap before dinner. Giovanna left, becoming the last person outside the family to see Susan alive. As darkness fell, neighbors noticed Josh taking the boys sledding, returning around 8:30 p.m. The garage door closed behind them with a finality that seems ominous in retrospect. At 11:45 p.m., a neighbor heard a car alarm pierce the silence, emanating from inside the Powells' closed garage. The house was dark, as if already mourning what was to come. Then came Josh's inexplicable decision, one that would raise red flags with investigators and haunt them for years to come. According to his account, somewhere between midnight and 12:30 a.m., he loaded his 2 young boys into the car for a camping trip to Simpson Springs Campground, a remote location in Utah's West Desert. The temperature had plunged below freezing, the desert night hostile and forbidding. He claimed Susan stayed behind, sleeping after cleaning a mysterious red stain from the carpet, a detail that would later send chills down the spines of investigators. It was a story that strained credibility. A father taking 2 toddlers camping in sub-zero temperatures in the middle of the night, leaving their mother behind. But it was just the beginning of a mystery that would unravel into one of the most disturbing true crime cases in Utah's history. The morning of December 7th unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Between 9 o'clock and 10 a.m., the staff at the boys' daycare center felt the first stirrings of unease when neither Charlie nor Braden appeared for their regular drop-off. Their attempts to reach either parent went unanswered, prompting them to contact Josh's mother Tara and sister Jennifer Graves. The growing sense of dread led Tara to contact police, who made the decision to force entry into the Powell home, fearing the worst. What they found inside only deepened the mystery. The house was empty, save for 2 box fans positioned to blow air onto a conspicuous wet spot on the carpet. Susan's purse lay abandoned, still containing her money, credit cards, ID, and keys, items no woman would willingly leave behind. The scene painted a picture of interrupted normalcy that sent chills down the investigators' spines. The afternoon brought a series of suspicious phone calls that would later become crucial evidence. At 3:03 p.m., when Giovanna Owings reached Josh on his mobile phone, he claimed to be simply driving around the city with his children. Yet, cell tower data would later reveal he had actually driven 20 miles out of town. At 3:34 p.m., Josh checked his voicemail, then made what investigators would later view as a calculated move, leaving a message on Susan's phone stating they had just returned from their camping trip and asking if she needed a ride home from work. It was a message that seemed designed to create an alibi rather than actually reach his missing wife. The web of deception began to unravel when Jennifer Graves called her brother at 5:27 p.m. When confronted about his whereabouts, Josh's story shifted from being at work to being camping. Jennifer's news about police presence and Susan's disappearance prompted an oddly telling response from Josh. "How much do you know?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication, before Josh abruptly ended the call. 20 minutes later, at 5:48 p.m., police attempted to reach Josh using Jennifer's phone. His response was bizarrely casual. He needed to feed his kids first. When he finally arrived home at 6:40 p.m., nearly 4 hours after first being contacted about his missing wife, the detective waiting in the driveway immediately noticed a glaring inconsistency. Josh's explanation for not answering his phone, claiming he needed to conserve battery without a charger, was instantly exposed as a lie when the detective spotted his phone plugged into a charger in plain view on the center console. The police interview that followed was a study in contradictions, with Josh's camping story raising more questions than it answered. His demeanor, his inconsistent statements, and his apparent lack of concern for his missing wife painted a picture that would haunt investigators for years to come. Each detail he provided seemed carefully crafted to create an alibi, yet each one also seemed to further entangle him in a web of suspicion and deceit. As investigators dug deeper, Josh's explanations began to crumble like a house of cards. His excuse for missing work, claiming he'd lost track of the days, struck investigators as particularly hollow. The fear of being fired seemed a weak justification for not making a simple phone call to his employer. But it was his response about Susan's whereabouts that truly set off alarm bells. A studied indifference that seemed wholly inappropriate for a man whose wife had vanished. The contents of Josh's vehicle told their own disturbing story. A generator, blankets, gas cans, and a shovel. Items that might seem innocent in isolation, but together painted a more sinister picture. Most troubling was the discovery of Susan's cell phone, its SIM card conspicuously missing. Josh's inability to explain its presence spoke volumes. The mystery of the two fans blowing in the living room added another layer of suspicion. Josh claimed Susan had requested their placement, but like many of his statements, this explanation rang hollow. As investigators spoke with friends and acquaintances, a darker picture began to emerge. Two friends revealed Susan's plans for divorce, but more chilling were the reports of Josh's disturbing conversations about murder and body disposal. Hallwell's statement that Susan would never have allowed a midnight camping trip in freezing temperatures with their young children further eroded Josh's credibility. The day after Susan's disappearance, Josh's behavior became increasingly erratic. His sister Jennifer witnessed him frantically washing loads of towels before his police interview, for which he arrived 4 hours late. When asked to surrender his phone for forensic analysis, he agreed, but investigators soon discovered he had already removed the SIM card, destroying potentially crucial evidence. His memory of the night Susan disappeared had become conveniently vague. "I just don't remember what activity we were doing," he claimed, though he found enough clarity to accuse his missing wife of infidelity. December 9th brought the most damning evidence yet. Armed with a search warrant, investigators discovered blood evidence by a sofa, later confirmed to be Susan's, along with blood from an unidentified male. The seizure of life insurance policies worth $1.5 million and Susan's letter expressing fear for her life painted a picture of premeditation. But perhaps most haunting was the discovery of Susan's personal safety deposit box at her workplace, containing a handwritten will and testament. For 4 years, Susan had been leaving a paper trail of her own fear, as if she knew she was living on borrowed time. These revelations transformed what had begun as a missing persons case into something far more sinister, a carefully orchestrated plot that had been years in the making. The evidence suggested that Susan had seen the storm coming, had tried to warn others, and had methodically documented her fears. Yet somehow, it hadn't been enough to save her. The haunting details of Susan's will revealed a woman who knew she was living under a death sentence. "If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one," she had written, alongside mentions of Josh's $1 million life insurance policy on her. Her friends painted a picture of a deteriorating marriage marked by constant fights and emotional distance, so severe that Susan had quietly consulted a divorce lawyer. But perhaps the most chilling testimony came from an unexpected source: 4-year-old Charlie Powell. His innocent words would punch holes in his father's carefully constructed narrative. "Mommy was in the van, but didn't come back with us," he told police, adding cryptically that she had stayed where the crystals are at Dinosaur National Park. Later, in what would become one of the case's most haunting moments, Charlie told his church teacher simply, "My mom is dead." Though parts of his story seemed fantastical, like taking an airplane to go camping, his brother Braden's daycare drawings would add another disturbing layer. The toddler had drawn a van with 3 people, telling staff matter-of-factly that Mommy was in the trunk. Josh's actions in the days following Susan's disappearance spoke volumes. He rented a car at Salt Lake City International Airport, putting 800 mysterious miles on it in just 2 days. He purchased a new cell phone, activating it near the Utah-Idaho border. Actions that suggested careful planning rather than panic over a missing spouse. Then came the systematic erasure of Susan's life, canceling her chiropractic appointments, withdrawing her IRA funds with a power of attorney, as if he knew she would never need them again. The police search expanded to mine shafts across Utah and Nevada, including Simpson Springs Campground where Josh claimed to have taken the boys. They found no trace of Susan, or any evidence that Josh and the boys had camped there that night. The boys' confirmation of a camping trip only deepened the mystery. Had their father taken them somewhere else entirely? By December 18th, Josh made what would prove to be another calculated move, packing up his sons and relocating to Puyallup, Washington, to live with his father. What was presented as a holiday visit would become a permanent move, taking the only potential witnesses, his young sons, far from the investigation's epicenter. A year after Susan's disappearance, Josh and Steve Powell launched what appeared to be a calculated media offensive, spinning a fantastical tale of Susan running away to Brazil with Stephen Kocher, a Utah man who had coincidentally gone missing in Nevada. They painted Susan as mentally unstable, suggesting she was now too afraid to return due to media attention. But like so many of their claims, this story crumbled under scrutiny. Investigators found no connection between Susan and Kocher, no evidence they had ever met. The August 2011 search of Steve Powell's home in Puyallup would reveal the true depths of the family's darkness. Investigators uncovered thousands of voyeuristic images, including those of Susan and 2 neighborhood girls in various states of undress. Steve's arrest on voyeurism charges finally gave Susan's parents the opening they needed to gain custody of Charlie and Braden. But the worst was yet to come. By 2012, Josh's grip on his children was slipping away. Unable to regain custody without submitting to a psychosexual evaluation and polygraph test, his supervised visits became increasingly tense. Then came February 5, 2012, a day that would forever haunt social worker Elizabeth Griffin Hall. As she stood helplessly outside Josh's locked door, he committed his final act of violence, attacking his sons with a hatchet before igniting gasoline throughout the house. The resulting explosion claimed not only his life, but those of his innocent children, taking with them any chance of learning Susan's fate. The tragedy wasn't over. A year later, Michael Powell, Josh's brother, took his own life by jumping from a multi-story building. His death only deepened suspicions about his involvement in Susan's disappearance. Police had discovered that Michael had sold a Ford vehicle to an Oregon wrecking yard just 2 weeks after Susan vanished, a vehicle that would later alert a cadaver dog to the presence of human remains in its trunk. The brothers' secret computer code, still unbroken by police, suggests they may have taken many secrets to their graves. By July 2013, West Valley City Police officially scaled back their active search for Susan. Deputy Police Chief Mike Powell acknowledged the harsh reality. Without a crime scene, body, or concrete evidence, Successful prosecution was impossible. The case remained open but stagnant. Another tragic cold case in the annals of true crime. Steve Powell's death in a Tacoma hospital in July 2018 marked the final chapter in this dark saga. With him died any remaining hope of uncovering the full truth about Susan's disappearance. The Powell family tragedy had claimed 5 lives: Susan, Charlie, Braden, Josh, and Michael, leaving behind a web of unanswered questions and a community forever changed by the darkness that had lived among them. When Steve Powell drew his final breath in a Tacoma hospital in 2018, he took with him any last hopes of uncovering the complete truth about Susan's fate. The police's missed opportunity for a final interview became yet another frustrating dead end in a case already full of them. Over the years, 3 main theories emerged to explain Susan's disappearance. The first, that she ran away with another man, quickly collapsed under scrutiny. Her friends' testimonies and her own journal entries painted a picture not of a woman planning an escape, but of someone determined to either save her marriage or leave it on her own terms. The abandoned credit cards, ID, and phone spoke volumes. No one plotting a new life leaves behind the very tools needed to build one. The second theory, suggesting a robbery gone wrong, was even more implausible. The untouched valuables and lack of struggle inside the home defied the basic patterns of violent robbery. More importantly, it failed to answer the fundamental question: why Susan? The answer to that question always led back to Josh. The third and most compelling theory pointed squarely at Josh Powell. The circumstantial evidence formed a damning mosaic. His implausible story about midnight camping in freezing temperatures, his suspicious behavior after Susan's disappearance, and perhaps most tellingly, his children's innocent revelations about their mother being in the van that night. Detective Ellis Maxwell of the West Valley City Police later revealed they had enough evidence to arrest Josh, but the Salt Lake County District Attorney's reluctance to prosecute without a body created a fatal delay. Analyzing the evidence suggests a carefully planned crime. The absence of obvious violence in the home points to Susan likely being incapacitated somehow, perhaps drugged or rendered unconscious, before being moved. The cleaned area dried by fans might have been where she fell, but the minimal blood evidence suggests Josh took precautions to prevent a bloody crime scene. The minuscule amount of blood found near the sofa tells its own story. This wasn't a crime of passion, but one of calculation. The middle-of-the-night camping trip emerges as what it likely was, a cover story to explain his absence while disposing of Susan's body. The boy's presence served a dual purpose, creating witnesses to the camping trip while making the entire scenario seem more innocent. After all, what killer takes their children along? The rental car's 800-mile journey in the days following Susan's disappearance, Josh's disposal of both his and Susan's phone SIM cards, and the encrypted communications with his brother Michael all point to a network of planned actions designed to hide evidence and create false leads. Michael's involvement became more apparent after his suicide, especially given the cadaver dog's alert on his sold vehicle, suggesting he may have helped transport Susan's body. Josh's final horrific act, the murder-suicide that claimed his son's lives, reads less like an admission of guilt and more like a final act of control, ensuring that his children could never reveal what they might have seen or remembered from that cold December night. In the end, the tragedy of Susan Powell isn't just about a missing woman. It's about a calculated crime that spiraled into multiple deaths, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions and unresolved justice. The details of Susan Powell's likely final hours paint a picture of meticulous planning and cold calculation. The pancakes Josh prepared that afternoon take on a sinister significance. Susan's reported tiredness afterward, suggesting possible drugging. If she vomited as a result, it would explain the urgently cleaned couch and carpet, the fans positioned to dry the evidence away through the night. Perhaps the most disturbing piece of physical evidence was the charred, rigid impact driver found in Josh's garage. The deliberate destruction of this power tool speaks volumes. It could have been the murder weapon, capable of delivering fatal blunt force trauma, or, more horrifically, being used while Susan was incapacitated. Though the minimal blood evidence initially seems to contradict this theory, Josh's careful preparation and cleanup could explain the lack of forensic evidence. Charlie's innocent comment about his mother staying where the crystals are provides a haunting clue to Susan's final resting place. The reference to geodes suggests Josh may have chosen one of Utah's numerous crystal-rich mine shafts as her burial site. He had everything needed to dispose of a body: tools, a shovel, gas cans, and the cover of darkness to do it. The elaborate charade that followed revealed Josh's capacity for deception. His performative voicemail to Susan, asking if she needed a ride home from work, stands out as particularly calculated. Each lie he told, to police, family, friends, and media, eventually unraveled, yet he maintained his facade until his final, devastating act. The case against Josh Powell builds on the classic criminal justice trinity: motive, means, and opportunity. He had all three, along with a pattern of suspicious behavior and circumstantial evidence that points squarely at his guilt. But without Susan's body, the case remains officially unsolved. Another tragic example of justice delayed becoming justice denied. The tragic end of the Powell family, Josh's murder-suicide with his sons, Michael's suspicious death, and Steve's passing, has left Susan's loved ones in a perpetual state of grief and uncertainty. The loss of Susan was devastating enough, but the subsequent deaths of innocent Charlie and Braden added layers of tragedy that continue to haunt the community. This case serves as a chilling reminder of how domestic violence can escalate to murder, how systems designed to protect can fail, and how the absence of a body can prevent justice from being served. Susan Powell's story, though technically unsolved, speaks clear truths about the nature of domestic violence and the importance of heeding warning signs. Her journal entries, safety deposit box will, and conversations with friends stand as a testament to her awareness of the danger she faced, a danger that proved all too real.